All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining and just finishing getting set up here. I want to ask James, maybe if you can, with the presentation on the screen, can you see my face or no?
No, I can't see your face, Ian. We can just see the screen that you're sharing.
The PowerPoint, yeah. Okay. Let me just try something here. Just give me a quick second.
Ian, I can see your face.
Oh, great. Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
You just, if you click at the top of your screen and do view who's talking, you can see yourself plus the PowerPoint.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, Graham. And everyone saying hi and giving me feedback in the chat. Thank you. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Bonsoir tout le monde. We'll get started. Thanks, everyone, for joining. And again, thanks. Merci beaucoup à tous ce soir pour se joindre à notre opportunité pour faire une réunion dans cette temps très difficile pour tous, mais thanks everyone for joining on another chance for us to join. This is our third webinar that we're having. The first was a big town hall type meeting last Thursday with a lot of topics that we covered. The second was yesterday, a great meeting we had with our coaches. We had it led by our coaching association and Ryan Blair, but supported by a whole cast of people to provide support for our coaches. And then tonight is an opportunity for us to join together to discuss more specifically and really narrow in and focus on our financial challenges collectively as a community. So I wanted to just start tonight, as I like to start a lot of my presentations, by thanking everyone. Thank you for all your efforts all the time, but especially your efforts at this trying time to lead your clubs, to lead your athletes. Merci à tous pour tous nos efforts. All the time, you're great leaders, but especially now, it's great to have us all together and just thank you. Tonight, our goal is to, again, focus on the economic impact for organizations, clubs, and employees in our CKC community. We're going to try to leave as much time as we can for questions and answers as we promised on our call last week. In terms of housekeeping, again, if you have questions, you can share them in the chat, and James Cartwright, is going to be monitoring his email and dropping questions from his email into the chat. Si vous avez des questions ici sur le chat, sur le GoToMeeting, posez ces questions en français ou anglais. Or you can donner an email à jcartwright@canoekayak.ca. Pour ton question, on répondu en français ou anglais. We'll answer in English or French. I have Pierre-Luc Laliberté on the line helping me to translate, and also for some of the more legal questions, we have Adam Clevenis also standing by to help for answers in French. Aussi, si vous avez des questions un peu légales ou technicales, aussi avec Pierre-Luc pour traduction, aussi on a Adam Clevenis pour répondre en français. I want to thank everyone for joining. I do want to give a shout out to Jen Fitzpatrick from Rowing, who is joining us tonight. One of our colleagues, the director of development for Rowing, and believe it or not, we do, after all, have lots in common with our friends from Rowing. So Jen, thanks for joining and listening in tonight, and we'll continue to reach out to all our partners as we try to find ways that we can all come together and work together. Our focus tonight is, as I said, the economic impact for our organizations, clubs, and employees in CKC. And I do just want to say briefly before I pass it over to Casey that we do want to make sure that we're clear that our focus is supporting our entire community, and that includes our organizations, our volunteer boards, our professional executive directors, our coaches, our officials, everyone who's involved in our sport. And our focus is to provide answers Our focus is to support everyone and continuing forward, finding ways where we can support your organizations and as a unit, as a team, and our whole community as a team. And that really is our focus, and I just want to make it clear. I'm now going to pass it over to Casey, who's going to say a few remarks.
Well, thanks very much, Ian, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the call. I'm sure many of you were on the call on Thursday night, and there's no doubt we're in unprecedented times with the COVID-19 pandemic. There's been a lot of uncertainty. You know, we've been looking through this uncertainty while we make decisions through the lens of personal health, family, our own community and country, of course, and as well as our paddling community itself. There has been a lot of monitoring that's been going on and over the past few weeks to assess and make decisions as best we can. And this monitoring does continue, and we know that decisions moving forward will certainly impact our paddling family. Some things have changed recently. We do know the dates of the Olympic and Paralympic Games. It's been suspended. They're in July of 2021 and September of 2021. There are some ICF events that have been canceled, and more will be coming this week, and we'll keep you posted on that. We do know that the qualification events for our continent are in May. And all this will impact decisions around our domestic competitions as well. And what does this mean for our domestic programs? I mean, we don't really know, but certainly it'll be a new normal for 2020. We're just not too sure what it'll look like, but certainly very different from what we've ever known. And that's unsettling for a lot of us, and simply not knowing, you know, clear things as we move forward, you know, without having that picture painted, it's difficult. It goes without saying that within our sport of paddling, our domestic programs and clubs, without question, are the lifeblood of our sport, and we must work together to keep it healthy. We do know that you are struggling, and Canoe Kayak Canada is committed to working with you to look for solutions to the challenges that we're facing. And this session tonight is intended to do just that. So again, thank you for joining us again, and hopefully this will be a very informative, productive session. And as you go through it, there'll be lots of opportunities to ask questions, and hopefully we'll have the answers. So, you know, having said that, it's my delight to introduce you to Adam Van Koeverden. Yeah, many of you know him. He's one of the greatest athletes we've ever had in our sport. Multi-world champion, Olympic champion. And as you know, recently he was successful in his election as a MP, Liberal MP from Milton, Ontario, as well a parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Diversity and Inclusion and Youth, and to the Minister of Canadian Heritage for Sport. So we're very fortunate to have a colleague of ours, a real hero within our community, spending some time with us tonight to understand the problems. He's dealing with this across sport, and you know, he's one of us. And Adam, we really welcome you and thank you for taking the time to join us tonight.
Okay, so Adam's on the phone, I believe. So we'll have to, as smooth as Casey's your handoff is, we'll have to just unmute, and then Adam, if you could speak up, and then we'll remute the other lines.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, there he is. Okay, go ahead, Adam. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Casey, for the warm introduction, and hi, everybody. I'm sure I know most of you guys on the call, but for those who have never met, it's nice to meet you on Zoom. I'm on my phone here, but I'm also using my computer, and I asked if Ian would add a link to the conversation for those who are using Zoom online. So it's a pleasure to address you in this forum. Thank you for all the hard work that you're doing. I know that everybody is following the good advice from our public health officials. And look, it goes without saying that this is a completely unprecedented time in the world, and certainly in Canada as well. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was with the Minister of Finance, and he said, "What do you think is going to happen with the Olympics?" And I said, "Well, Bill, there's never been an Olympics canceled outside of wartime, so I think, you know, in all likelihood, it's going to go forward one way or another." And he said, well, we'll see in a couple of weeks. And certainly, now we realize that an Olympics has never been canceled outside of wartime or COVID time. So this is genuinely unprecedented. And I know tensions are very high, and people are anxious, and they're well within their rights to be. This is an interesting time to be involved in politics. Certainly, this is something that I never anticipated. But that all said, I want to help my community in Milton get through this, and my sport community as well. And I want to be a resource for you. So please don't hesitate to reach out through any of the conventional means that you guys know. You can get in touch with me anytime, or through my official email, which is adam.vancouverden@parl.gc.ca, same as every email. And if you just Google Adam Vancouverden MP email, and it comes up quite quickly. But if that link is available to everybody, then I would like you to, if you could, familiarize yourself with this website for the sake of yourself as a Canadian, as a worker, and potentially for those who manage a team as a small business owner, because the measures that have been taken by the Minister of Small Business, SME, so small medium-sized enterprises, they extend to nonprofits. And I know that most and many clubs kind of function as a nonprofit. They're not all exactly the same. Certainly not all businesses are the same either. But there are supports available for you. The first that you'll see under support for businesses is all about avoiding layoffs. Because if we overwhelm the CERB and the EI sort of sector, then it'll certainly be overwhelmed and it'll be overflowing. So the objective with regards to avoiding layoffs is to provide that subsidy for small and medium-sized businesses, and certainly businesses who are larger than small and medium-sized as well. So there's a work-sharing program which probably doesn't have too much to do with canoe clubs and sports clubs, but the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy probably does. It's important that everybody who's struggling right now identifies what support measures are going to be there for them, and prepare yourself to access these monies. Certainly, if you're in a situation that's financially tenuous or dire, I would encourage everybody to go online to the CRA website, register under my account, and register for direct deposits, because it'll take a lot longer for a check to be mailed to your home than it will be to get a direct deposit. On the sports side, I was on a call earlier today with NSOs and the COC and the CPC, Canadian Paralympic Association, and getting a lot of the information from that high level is important. But I recognize this is going to have a huge impact on the stakeholders as well. That's people that run camps, that's people that run clubs, sports programs, after-school programs. This is really important that we all come together as a community and identify which support programs are going to benefit us. And early on, if it doesn't, and this is something that we identified with respect to nonprofits, and I think many canoe clubs fall into the category of nonprofits. We worked hard to make sure that nonprofits were included. So familiarize yourself with this website. If you haven't already been, then it's canada.ca/COVID-19 or canada.ca/coronavirus, and navigate your way over to supports for businesses. There's a lot of information on there, and it's changing often. Okay, so go back regularly, refresh your page. If you have any questions, and reach out to me. I hope there's an opportunity for questions now. Ian, I don't know how it works on Zoom. I know that you can kind of say that you want to ask a question. I'm available. I'm going to be here till the end of the call, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah. So thanks, Adam. Really appreciate it. How we're going to work it is, if you are available to stay to the end, we'll go through all the questions at the end. Just trying to make sure we leave as much time as possible for questions. I'm sure there will be some for you. So if you are available to stay, that would be great. And thank you very much, Adam, for being here. We know it's a extremely busy time for you. So thank you for making the time to be with your extended paddling family tonight. So thanks for being here. A couple notes just before I pass it to Kathy. I forgot off the top. I have made this PowerPoint available. Cette présentation, c'est disponible sur la page de web CKC, sur la page COVID-19, on the COVID-19 page. If you're on the phone, si vous avez sur le téléphone, cette présentation, c'est sur la page de web COVID-19, and you can follow along, and it's translated in English and French. Thanks, Adam, for really valuably pointing out at a high level some of the measures that have brought in, and I think that's a perfect segue to you, Kathy Hare, who's going to have a lot of some detail and break down some of the specific measures that are available. So, Kathy, I'm going to pass things to you if you're there and available.
I am here. Thank you, Ian and Adam. That's great. I'm actually going to skip over part of my presentation because I had not seen this page on the emergency response benefit, which obviously gives a whole raft of information, which is really fantastic. It helps to clarify a lot of the questions that I've been getting over the last number of webinars over the last week and a half. So I encourage people to take a look at the chat link that's been posted, and it'll take some time to digest this. I know it'll be on my schedule for tomorrow morning to read through all of this, which I don't have time to read through right now. I wanted to touch on a number of things in addition to the emergency response benefit that Adam's talked about. Starting off with the emergency wage subsidy, and Adam, feel free to jump in here if you have any additional information from what was released by Minister Morneau today. So the emergency wage subsidy is replaces the temporary wage subsidy of 10% that was announced a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. I just want to qualify to state that this subsidy does still require parliamentary approval and royal assent, so it's in the works and hopefully will be approved in the next coming short while. Essentially what this is a remuneration of 75% of salaries and wages that are paid to employees over the course of March 15th to June 15th. There is a cap on the maximum amount of salary that it will cover, which is $58,700. There are some eligibility requirements for this. What employers are going to need to have experienced a 30% or more decline in gross revenues due to COVID-19. And this reduction percentage is determined by comparing the revenues between March and May of 2019 and that same period in 2020. So you need to take a look at what revenues did you generate between March and May last year, and what revenues have you generated in March of this year, and are you projecting to have generated in April and May of 2020, but you're now not going to because of cancellations of events, registrations not happening, memberships not being paid, that type of thing. It was indicated that this subsidy is not available for publicly funded organizations. So those organizations that are receiving funds from the government, and Adam, maybe there's clarification here, but is this federally funded, provincially funded, municipally funded? Not too clear on what that means. And organizations are going to have to reapply every month to ensure that they still qualify to meet this. Applications are going to be made through a CRA portal in the coming weeks, and funding will be released within 6 weeks of applying. So there are links with the document that I provided Ian that provided more information on this, and I'm sure that there will be additional information coming over the next few days and coming week in regards to how this can be accessed. In addition to this, there's the emergency business account. So small businesses and not-for-profits can apply to receive an interest-free loan of up to $40,000. And there are some conditions to this with regards to how you can access it, as well as some benefits with regards to the repayment of it and some forgivable portions of it. To be eligible for this, you must have had payroll costs between $50,000 and $1 million in 2019. And this is being administered through financial institutions. So I encourage you to contact your local bank, your local bank that you're working with. I know that Scotiabank is working on getting a portal through their website to accept applications for this from small businesses. Adam spoke to the emergency response benefit, and a link has been provided for you. So I encourage you to take a look at that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it now because there's such a wealth of information that's available there. Just do note that, as Adam said, it starts to be accessible April 6th. And for those individuals that don't have a My account through CRA, you're encouraged to start that application process because there is a confirmation letter that gets sent to you through the mail, which takes some time to get there. Ian, I think I'm going to leave it at that for now and see if there's any questions that either myself or perhaps Adam himself can answer.
I think I'm going to call a little bit of an audible, and I'm going to open up a question period now, because I think this is such a critical piece of the puzzle with the emergency response benefit. I did note here on the PowerPoint, Kathy, and I could just note that the emergency response benefit applies to wage earners as well as contract workers. So
yeah, I think it's important to note that this is the place where those individuals, like a lot of coaches who may be contractors or self-employed, would be able to benefit where they would not be able to benefit through EI. And I think it's really important to note that the emergency response benefit is only in relation to wages and revenues lost because of COVID-19. So it doesn't relate to the fact that you quit your job before this all took place, or that you're looking for work and you're not able to find it.
Yeah, so critical pieces. So I am going to call an audible here because there are a number of questions, and I think this is such a critical piece of the puzzle. So I'm going to back up. If there are more questions, the chat function is up in the top right of your screen, I believe. So first question, and this is sort of for Kathy and Adam, for the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, if we earn a couple $100 doing non-club work, like working for someone else, are we still eligible? EI normally deducts many earnings from your EI payments. Will it be the same for the CERB?
Wow, I haven't had a chance to read through the wealth of information that's on that website right now, because literally I just saw it when Adam shared it with me. Mm-hmm. I would suggest take a read through the website and see what it says in regards to that. Usually there is a clawback in relation to things like that, but this is a bit of a new initiative.
So, am I off mute, Ian? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is a clause with CREB that you have to lose all of your income. You know, it basically says the eligibility is who have stopped working because of COVID-19 or are eligible for employment insurance, regular or sickness benefits. So I think full stop, if you're eligible for EI, then you can apply for CREB. If you cut lawns on the side or something like that, and I don't really know how you manage your income, it's not really my business, but if you had an income of $5,000 or more in 2019 or in the 12 months prior to the date of this application, then you're eligible. The eligibility requirements are on this website, so I'd encourage you to go. I'm not providing any personal advice or suggestions. I'm not a financial advisor or certainly a lawyer, but it's pretty clear. If you have another job and it's a real job, then I don't think you would be eligible for EI. So as a rule, everybody that's eligible for EI is eligible for CREB, but there are people who are not eligible for EI who are still eligible for CREB. Those are like, contractors, private contractors. There's also some guidelines around, why you're unemployed. So if you're unemployed because you're taking care of somebody who is sick, then you are eligible for CREB. There is a drop down here. There's a lot of question and answers available here. I'm just looking to see if there's one specifically around a second income.
So what I suggest we'll do, sorry, Adam, but what we will do, just to give you a second, is same as we will make sure we capture these questions, and any ones that we have follow up on, we will share and publish some answers. I know everyone understands the Minister of Finance spoke on this at 2 p.m. today. Site went up, and this is kind of the nature of the time we're in. So the next question for both Adam and Kathy, I guess, we haven't hired summer staff yet, so can't use the 75% wage subsidy. However, we don't have enough membership revenue to pay our fixed costs, which include insurance, CKC, or divisional fees. We expect a shortfall of $3,000, which is a lot for a small club. Is there another program where we can access the funding? So
the answer is yes. You can go to your bank and access that $40,000 as long as you had $50,000 in payroll in 2019 or in the preceding 12 months, and I suspect you probably did. That $40,000 is not like a conventional loan. For up to a year, there's no interest accrued. And the really good news is if you pay it all back by December 2022, then it's 25% forgivable. So if that's where the real benefit comes in, it's an interest-free loan for a year. If you don't pay it back after the year, so that would be 2021 March or April, then you start accruing interest. But if you pay it back by the end of 2022, then 25% is forgivable. So you only have to pay back 30K out of 40. You don't have to take 40. That's the maximum that they're providing, and that's a service being offered to by the banks, guaranteed by the government of Canada. So whichever bank you've been working with, I have a small business bank account because I run a constituency office, and they reached out to me not knowing that I'm an MP, not looking for that sort of support. I imagine most of your banks have probably already reached out to you or the treasurer, whoever manages your finances. So that's not wage subsidy. That's a separate program. That's called the emergency small business or emergency benefit. Let me just find it. And Ian, if you could kill a few seconds here.
Well, I'll just ask, Kathy, did you want to add, or were you going to the same answer?
So it's called the emergency bank account, which I mentioned. So yeah, contact your financial institution, and if they haven't reached out to you, they'll have more information on it. And like Adam said, I see this as being the bridge between the emergency wage subsidy and being able to pay your bills.
It's also, the wage subsidy is just for wages, and it's the primary reason for having that is to reduce the number of layoffs, whereas the emergency bank account is for your operating costs, such as rent and the fees that you identified. So I would work with your bank on that.
Okay, that's great. Another question, can a business or canoe club that hires self-employed contractors or coaches, i.e. not employees, be eligible for the emergency wage subsidy?
No, these workers would fall under the emergency response benefit if they've already been employed. So the ERB is where self-employed and contractors are covered if they're losing wages with regards to COVID-19.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. Another question, if we have received revenue now but may need to provide refunds if we can't offer summer programs, so the wage subsidy is hard to qualify when revenues come in for a finite period.
So I don't know if Steve Indig's on the line here, but this sort of comes back to the whole rebate question, which we've been dealing with, and the inability to provide service for fees. So Steve, are you on the line?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Was this Kathy, the question around membership fees and the ability to keep them? The threshold that we're recommending to people is to suggest that, look, people are paying for a service, and if they've received that service then you should have the ability to make a good argument to keep their fees. I can give an example of my kids are in private school and they're on Zoom classrooms every day from 9 o'clock till 3 o'clock. So it's very difficult for me to argue to say to the school, I want my money back. I think it would be very difficult without providing the service to say we're going to keep your fees. And if those fees are returned for services non-rendered, then yeah, I think that would be a huge portion, a reduction in your revenue. So that's kind of our stance on this. Some of you may have refund policies which you may be able to stand behind to not provide refunds, but I would say, as we've heard several people say on the call, this is unprecedented times. I think we're in a bit of a, what I would call a hoarding phase. And yes, it relates to toilet paper and wipes, but I also think money too. So I would hope everybody applies their values and their ethics in dealing with fees to make a good decision, of course, and make it justifiable. I have been to small claims court several times relating to fees, and normally the judge will say, did they receive a service? So I think that's a really important threshold to remember with respect to fees and dues. So I'll stop there.
Okay, and I think thank you, Stephen. I think there is some clarification here, but I think James is running the, or James or Jessica, whoever's running the microphones. Adam Clevenis wanted to add something, and he's on the phone. So can we do the unmute, find him, and remute thing, please?
Okay, give me a second. I'm going to work on that.
Thank you.
Adam, if you can start speaking
Say
now.
something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Just one thing to be careful, especially for the clubs in Quebec. As it relates to membership fees, those could potentially, actually would even likely fall under the Consumer Protection Act, and there may be requirements for the clubs to refund certain amounts. So be careful there. Check the Office of Consumer Protection in Quebec. Their website's really good. I know that they do have a lot of information on courses as it relates to, you know, music and things like that, and gym memberships, for example. And under certain conditions, there are mandatory refunds under the Quebec Consumer Protection Act. So be careful there, because you may find yourself in a situation where someone's making a request with a valid claim under that act.
Thank you. Thanks, Adam. And I think I want to clarify, because I'm reading the question, and I think I want to make sure we answer the question we had, and it's around, I believe, the question is about the revenue period where we can get revenue now, where the maybe revenue and fees that have come in during the period of where we're going to be assessed for the wage subsidy, which I believe, Kathy, was March to June. Is that correct? Or April to?
It's March to May, and you know that's a really good question. I think that you would have some leeway to be able to determine, so is it likely by May 31st that you would be refunding portions or all of this amount, in which case taking that out of the revenue projection for April and May. I mean, you would already know how much you've made in March, because March is now past, but it's a really good question to be able to figure out. So if we received membership or registration fees in March, for example, for events that may be happening, one of the things I would suggest is you may want to use the deferral method of revenue. So if you're receiving revenue in between March and May for events that are not happening or starting to happen until June, typically in accounting practices, you wouldn't record that as revenue between March and May anyway. You would record that as revenue in June. So you might want to spend a little bit of time, if you're not sure, talking to somebody with some accounting background to just figure out, how do we need to track this, and at what point do we need to make a decision on the types of refunds we're going to be issuing.
And I'll just add to that. Thank you. I'll add to that part of the reason we wanted to have this call is to get these questions out, and also to have Adam hear them, but all of us as a community hear them. And we're going to, we'll continue to work, and I'll work with Kathy, and I'll speak to it at the end, following up on some of these really critical, sharp questions that we think could definitely apply across the country to our different organizations. So we'll definitely keep thinking about that, and if there's some support we can provide, we'll do our best to provide that specific advice. The next question, I believe, has been answered with an earlier question. So if it hasn't, someone could provide clarity. The next question is from another question is, the portal's been having issues today and errors are coming up. Probably not surprising, but just being raised. I'm just raising that the CRA portal is having issues with errors coming up. Adam, have you heard of that?
Yeah, of course. I think it's totally oversubscribed right now. If it's possible just to go on and register, I suppose you're probably, not just looking for information, but also registering with my account, etc. Try to do that in the evening or very, very early in the morning. That's what I've heard has been working. But just to re-clarify, the bank account is done with your bank. So after you've done registering with CRA, certainly get in touch with your bank, because I think the more I think about what canoe clubs are going to be able to use, what summer camps are going to be able to use, what event organizers are going to be able to use, it's more and more this 40K, particularly just because it'll get people through, and because 25% of it's forgivable, it's quite a good aspect of the program. And I think most canoe clubs have 50K in payroll in a given year. Just another point of clarity from Kathy. She's right. The way that it's worded currently is if it's in March or April or May that you have 30% reduced revenues from the previous year. I don't know when most canoe clubs do their big sort of drive for membership. But as I recall, it's probably later than April, so that might not apply. I don't think the revenues are not necessarily going to factor into it as much for canoe clubs. But if the wage subsidies are an option, then they certainly will.
Thanks, Adam. I'm going to do 2 more questions now, and then we're going to continue. We're going to continue on with the presentation and circle back at the end, definitely for more questions. So this question is there any advice regarding summer-only hires? Paddle camp counselors, coaches that only work in July and August, typically students. Usually we'd hire them now for work in the summer. Does it help them at all to offer employment now, or is it better to postpone? And this is a great question. Kathy, have you thought about this and have some initial thoughts, or?
Well, we have encountered this question today. This is our 5th webinar of the day, so we're sort of evolving as information comes out today. So I think that's a great question. Do you hire now in order to take advantage of the 75% wage subsidy? I think you need to keep in mind, what is it that you're going to be doing? And, I don't know if Adam has some clarification on this, but I think it comes down to a business decision for you, and as well as a contractual agreement that Steve could likely answer. So
yeah,
it's an interesting dilemma. I don't know.
Yeah, Steve, thanks, Kathy. I would say if you're looking at making hires in July and August and unsure if your programs are going to run, and again, I'll defer to Adam Clevenis on the Quebec legislation, but the way that most provincial legislations work is you usually have the ability to terminate an employee in the first 3 months. Some jurisdictions, it may be down to 30 days, but you can usually let them go without payment or notice in lieu, without payment or without notice. So the risk to the club would be nominal from a legal perspective, but of course, we want to apply our values and ethics here too. I would be really transparent with students. Say, look, we're trying to run. We're gonna, if we are, you're for sure in, but you have to be aware that it's very possible due to government decision or people's apprehension of being involved in programming right away may be a factor. So I think from a legal perspective on an employment side, the risk is fairly low.
So I'm going to make an assumption that most seasonal workers at canoe clubs are also university students. I think that's probably accurate. And there's a lot of anxiety right now with university students. There's going to be a large lack of, obviously there's going to be a lack of summer work that'll extend to the canoe clubs. People will typically think about like the patio work and summer camps. Canoe clubs and summer staff for sports programs are certainly going to be affected as well. And the way that it's worded currently is if you don't currently have a job and your wages haven't been impacted today, then you're not eligible for CRB. And there's actually a clause right now on the website that says, for example, if you are a university student, you don't currently have income, don't currently have like an employment contract, then, if you're still in the job hunt, basically, then you're not eligible. Many of our coaches are not on job hunts because they knew they had a secured job from their canoe clubs, and they knew they were going to go and earn a few $1,000s towards their tuition at the canoe club. That's going to be they're going to be in a tough position because they may not be working, and they won't be eligible for CREB unless they can prove that they earned $5,000 in the previous year. Some of them did, and some of them maybe didn't. But in the case of the ones that are, working really hard and they're higher level coaches and they did earn $5,000 last year, I would encourage you to talk to a lawyer and figure out how you can find a solution for the coaches that are that would have been on staff that don't currently have a contract that shows that they were going to have a job and it was fairly secure. Otherwise, they won't be eligible for CREB. I'm, as the parliamentary secretary for youth, trying to find a solution for that because I think it's summer work season is going to be extremely affected. So canoe clubs are usually really good employers. So I would encourage you to find solutions for some of your staff by talking to the legal experts on call here and also with your staff directly.
Yeah, and I think that's another one for sure we're going to keep following up on because it's a tough one and we know it's looming. The last question before we cut off and just keep moving for now. If you're not eligible for the 75% wage subsidy, oh, sorry, it skipped on me. Could you still be eligible for the 10% program that was first announced, or is that gone?
That's gone. The 75% replaces the 10%.
Sorry, Kathy, I'll just hop in. You actually would be. You would be eligible for the 10%. It's not gone. Can
you elaborate on that, Adam?
Yeah, I can. I have to find the website, but I already answered that question today. Can we come back to it?
Sure.
We'll pick it up.
I can almost guarantee it, but I would like to be able to provide people with absolute clarity.
Sure.
That 10% subsidy for wage subsidy it's not discarded. It wasn't replaced. It was added to.
Okay, well, we'll circle back to that as our first question at the end, and it'll give us a chance to come back to it. Thank you. And I see these questions coming in, and we will get back to them, but we will move just through some presentations. So, Stephen, I'm going to pass it to you to just talk a little bit from the legal perspective. Thanks, Steve.
Sure. Thanks, Ian. Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name's Steve Indig. I'm a lawyer with the Sport Law and Strategy Group. I'm Adam Clavenis. I'm going to tag you in here a little bit, maybe to talk about some of the Quebec nuances. But as Kathy Hare mentioned, she and I have been doing a bit of a road show, and this is our 5th one today. So we've got a lot of feedback from other organizations, both large and small. So we want to just give a quick overview of what we've been learning and the information we've been able to provide to organizations. So the first one is a little bit on business operations. I don't think anybody knows when the new normal or normalcy is going to be effective again, whether it's going to be May 1st, May 15th, June 1st, or September 1st. So organizations are querying about different business operations and cash flow and what can they pay and what can't they pay. I really would challenge all of you to look at your budget, look at the government programs, look at your reserve fund, and see and run different models that if the season starts June 1st versus July 1st versus August 1st, what that looks like. Obviously, we want to keep people employed. We want to provide services. We want to be on the water. We want to be active. So I think you want to be prepared for that in the different scenarios that you may be facing. We have had people today bring up the word bankruptcy, and that's obviously not something we want to see occur. I've had the ability to work in sport for close to 20 years and have been involved in one bankruptcy. And it's not fun. So if there are ways, as Adam and Kathy have spoke to, about keeping your doors open, or maybe making some concessions, or please look at those options, including the values that we want to keep people employed, as I spoke about before. Another topic that keeps coming up is reserve funds. And of course, you all know the expression that it's just there for a rainy day. So I would urge to all of you that it is raining, if not pouring. So it might be an opportunity to look at using that money to keep your doors open, to keep people employed, to do the right thing. Other things that have come up quite routinely is insurance questions, particularly what we've now identified as the Zoom home workout, where somebody in your club may decide they want to host a webinar or an exercise class online. There is lots of differing information being provided on insurance and whether that insurance actually is covering that kind of activity. Different PSOs and different NSOs have interpreted differently with information they've received from their insurance brokers. So if you are going to be running any online classes, I do suggest you check with your insurer as to whether that activity is covered. You have to remember the fundamental principles for insurance coverage is that it applies to a sanctioned activity involving registered participants. So one of the queries I saw today was, well, we outsource our dry land training to a third party. I have got information from some insurers to say that that person would not be covered from insurance because they are not a registered participant or a registrant within the organization. So what I, again, challenge everyone to do, if you are going to run Zoom workouts, make sure you have clarity as to whether insurance is provided. The other thing, of course, is we can't forget about safe sport. And it was a very popular word about a week ago, and something that's got left by the wayside, that obviously not forgotten. So I still recommend the rule of two. I still recommend speaking to your staff and your athletes and your employees and your coaches about proper social media communications. Obviously, the use of those tools is increasing substantially. I wish I had bought shares in Zoom 2 weeks ago, but please remind your people that when they're talking to athletes that it should be, of course, appropriate. It should be inclusive of other individuals, and we should be notifying the parents of how we're going to be communicating. I've got a couple more topics, and the big one will be the employment issues. A quick one is leases. Some of you may have a lease to pay for office space or a boathouse or storage. A lot of your leases likely have a force majeure clause, and that clause speaks to acts of God or government action. And again, this is exactly what we're in the middle of. So look at your lease and see if you can find a force majeure clause that will speak to whether or not you actually have to pay for your rent during this time. I have seen my fair share of leases this week, and I've actually seen them in the other way, saying force majeure actually requires you to pay even though you can't access it, even though you can't access your space. Very important to look at that. Another legal principle to consider is frustration of contract. It's a scenario where not to the fault of either party, where someone can't provide the services they had contracted for, which would in end terminate the contract. So that's something to consider if you're looking for an out. The other issue that we're dealing with is AGMs, annual general meetings. Most of you would be having your AGMs likely in May, June, or July, or sorry, April, May, or June. Sometimes people do September, October. Most corporate legislations require you to have your AGM within 15 months of your last AGM and 6 months of fiscal year end. That is really the requirements. Some corporations legislation have been amended to allow for some flexibility with respect to those timelines. So in Ontario, they have allowed for a stay if your AGM is scheduled during the state of emergency to be extended 90 days beyond the state of the emergency. The Canada Corporations Act, like a CKC, would have the ability to apply for an extension. So you have to actually write to Corporations Canada. And a lot of amendments have been made to allow for online meetings. A couple things to remember when you run your online meetings is individuals on the call have to have the ability to immediately communicate with one another, to debate. So like what we're doing now, there has to be immediate dialogue. And the secondary approach is there has to be the ability to have anonymous voting. So some people are setting up through their scrutineer, vote at ckc.ca. Others are using an online system called Simply Voting. It's quite economical and it's anonymous and allows people to pre-set up their motions and people get to vote online. So there is the ability to do that. And again, as I said, most legislations allow for electronic meetings, or some of them are creating emergency amendments to allow for them to be held. With respect to your income tax filings, yes, not-for-profits do have to file a income tax return. The deadlines have not been amended by CRA, so if your year end is December 31st, you still have to file your return by June 1st. And if your year end is March 31st, you do have to file by September 30th. Those dates have not been amended. The big issue that, of course, we've been dealing with is the employment side. And I would say there's been three things that we've been dealing with: modifications of employment agreements, layoffs, and of course, terminations. I like to call employment law the gray zone, roulette, and I'll tell you why. Every province would have its own provincial employment legislation, which sets out the minimums. And again, I'll let Adam speak to Quebec shortly. In the common law, in the other provinces, based on the common law systems, the judges' decisions that are made in court alter those minimums defined in the legislation. So for argument's sake, in Ontario, you can provide, per the Act, a temporary layoff of 13 consecutive weeks without notice and without pay. The common law can be construed to say that a layoff is viewed as constructive dismissal. Constructive dismissal is you've substantially altered the employment relationship, in essence terminating it. Therefore, the person would be entitled to payment in lieu of notice, a continuation of benefits, a payment for unused accrued vacation, and other normal benefits they might have received while being employed. This could be a linchpin for people to use that as an opportunity to get a package that they may not normally get. But I think you have to make informed decisions as to the risks that are being exposed to you. The employments, you can contract out of the common law. So I want to reiterate, each one of you, if you are contemplating any sort of employment change, I would suggest you seek legal counsel to look at their employment agreement, to look at the legislation, to look at the amendments, if any, that there is to legislation, so you guys can make an informed decision and understand your risk exposure on doing a certain employment move. Termination of pay, termination in the common law is far greater than the Act. Again, in Ontario, it's basically 1 week per year of service up to a maximum of 8 weeks. Even if you've been employed for 10 years and your employer wants to terminate, under the Act, they only have to give you 8 weeks notice, 2 months. Under the common law, it's a test based on your age, your position within the association, your length of employment, and the big kicker, your ability to find new work. So to terminate somebody today, particularly as a paddling coach, to find new work in today's climate, of course, we know is almost impossible. So you really have to make informed decisions on how you manage your employees. The other, of course, is some of you may pay your people as contractors. As I just said, the Employment Standards Act sets the minimum for employees. The standards or the relationship of a contractor and an organization is the contract itself. So if you're looking to terminate a contractor, of course, again, you're going to have to look at the contract. You may be able to argue the legal principle of frustration, as I spoke about before, the inability to provide the services you were contracted to do because of reasons beyond our control. So again, really important to look at those different options. We have had a lot of success with employment modifications where employers are going to their employees and saying, look, our revenue is down. We don't know when it's going to come back up. We still want to have you work, but maybe you'll work 50% of time and we'll still pay you 50%. Most employees have been very receptive to that. So again, back to one of my first comments was, you know, look at this, look at your money, look at your budgets, consider your values, and make these decisions with as much information as you can. So I'm going to stop there. Adam Clevenes, maybe you want to jump in and speak about some of the things that maybe are a little bit different in Quebec.
I won't get into the differences. I'll maybe just say that one of the best resources that would be available is a website called Educalois, which actually is really helpful for employers and employees to understand their rights in an employment situation. I think, you know, what I would say to that is before you get there, I don't think that anyone really is in a position to wanting to have to get to the point of laying coaches off. You know, it's you know, that would be sort of your last resource and final recourse if you found yourself in that situation. But I think that there's a number of steps before you even get to layoffs or termination. But if anyone's in Quebec and wants to look at that website, Educalois, it's excellent. It's in English and French, and it provides a lot of good information on different employee rights, and it'll explain things, you know, the distinctions between employees and contract workers and everything like that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Adam, and thank you, Steve, for that great information. I just through to the questions, but just looking ahead, and Steve, thank you for speaking to contingency planning and budgeting in this moment of crisis. Just so everyone knows, CKC as an organization is doing the same thing, and we're looking at the contingencies, looking ahead, what could happen with different resumption dates, with different levels of activity resuming, and what we can do in those different scenarios to continue to support our members within the reality of what that looks like. So at the same time that you're going through contingency planning, we're doing the same thing and looking at you know, some realities where the summer months might look quite different, and how can we be creative to continue to help our members and potentially add value for membership in different ways, which we're just beginning to explore, and we had some initial good discussions with the coaches as well about that. Kathy, did you want to add anything around contingency planning and budgeting? No.
I'm not
Okay.
sure.
No, okay. I'm not about, just in general. So I think that what we're again, we'll switch back to questions, but I just wanted to add that in terms of our support as well. So there are some specific questions coming in, so everyone knows. We are recording the call, so we'll be able to review the questions, share the answers with everyone who might not be able to make the call tonight. But also, some of these specific questions that I think are very powerful and important for our community, we'll continue to dive into them. We'll have, after listening to the coaches' issues and questions on Tuesday and this evening, we are going to look at trying to find ways where we can have more one-on-one support or contacts for organizations, PTSOs and clubs and coaches communally to reach out to us to provide this support. And some of that support, that's Kathy, I was kind of putting you on the spot, I didn't mean to, but where we can, we will try to provide our support as well for that contingency planning in line with the choices that we're looking at as we go along. it's a
For
fluid
sure.
situation. Yeah.
For sure. I'm more than happy to answer questions outside of this this session now and provide support for, you know, financial issues and such. No, not a problem.
Okay, so with that, I'm gonna stop and just switch back to questions for the rest of our time with a small wrap up at the end. But I just wanted to get back to really importantly what we want to do is questions. And again, si vous avez des questions en français, posez ces questions ici sur le chat ou aussi sur l'email à jcartwright@canoekayak.ca et on répond en français ou anglais. On disponible dans la langue officielle. So we're going to go back to where we left off with questions. Let me just scroll. So it's and as the questions pour in, it keeps bumping me down. I'll do my best here. So again, the question is, if you're not eligible for the 75% wage subsidy, can you still be eligible for the 10% wage that was first announced? So Adam, or did you take a look at it? Oh, sorry. We'll just get you to mute up, please.
After
So go ahead, Adam.
So I found the source of that clarity, and I think it's quite clear, but we're looking for further clarification. It's not on Canada.ca. It was in an email today to me, but it's an official email, and I do think that if you don't qualify for the 75% wage subsidy, then you can still apply. It says those organizations that do not qualify for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy may continue to qualify. It says may continue to qualify for the previously announced wage subsidy of 10%. So feel free to get in touch with me if you don't qualify for the 75% wage subsidy and you would like to apply for the previous iteration, then in a couple of days I'll have further clarity.
So Adam, that's great. Thanks. It's Kathy. One of the biggest questions that we're having is the classification around this publicly funded, because as you know, NSOs, PSOs are provincially or federally funded. So getting some kind of clarity around when it says that publicly funded is not eligible for the employment subsidy, it would be really beneficial to be able to know that they can still apply for the 10%.
I think that deserves some clarity, because just because an organization is publicly funded doesn't necessarily, well, the clubs aren't, first of all. NSOs and PSOs, MSOs are certainly different, but a lot of NSOs, fall into the category of like, yes, publicly funded, but in many cases, the vast majority of their revenues are not from that source. So that requires further clarification, and I'm happy to provide that on a subsequent call or in an email if you like to follow up.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Okay, our next question was Canada summer job applications have already gone in for summer student positions. We only find out in May if we receive these grants. If clubs are unable to run summer programs, will we have to refund that grant money? Do you know, Kathy?
So I think when you receive confirmation that you are going to receive X number of positions through the Canada Summer Grants, which comes out probably in end of April, I think, timeframe. I think we'll have a lot more clarity at that point in time whether or not the summer programs are actually going to be running, and you do not have to accept the funds. So I think it's something that you need to look at when you actually get the confirmation of funding, whether or not you want to accept it, because if the program doesn't run and you've accepted the funds, then yes, most likely you would have to refund the money.
Okay, thank you. Just finding my place here. So the next question was a question of clarity. For hourly paid employees versus contract or fixed term, this would not apply. I don't think it's advisable provided fixed term summer positions. Club may owe for the terms of contracts even though the club may not be open. I think this was a question around offering finding offers for summer employees now versus waiting, and how we can support them. I think it was related to a discussion we were having. I'll tie that question in, or if Kim Anderson asked the question, if you want to clarify below, but I think we'll tie that into our follow-up on that question.
Ian, it's Steve. I just want to go down a little bunny hill. Maybe that was open there. Fixed term contracts. So again, we talk about how the common law applies or interprets fixed term contracts. The common law will look at them as likely to have the inability to terminate during the fixed term. So it's very important that when you offer a contract for a fixed term, it does have a good termination clause embedded in it. If there is none, it will be a fixed term contract, meaning you'd have to pay out the value of the contract to end it. So again, I like to always call it the 90-10 rule. Please spend the 10% to have a contract reviewed rather than spending the 90% of trying to get out of a poorly written one. So lots of little nuances, lots of different common law interpretations that may not be described in the legislation. So just be careful with employment. Of course, I see the worst of the worst, but important to try and do it correctly.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just, okay, so Kim says her question's been answered, so good, satisfaction. Would someone who had an employment contract in place before the CERB was announced be eligible for their income support if the start date of the contract is May?
So I think that was answered in that there needs to be earnings of $5,000 in the prior year. The fact that the contract hasn't started means that you're not actually paying them. So there would not be a subsidy with regards to March and April. And, you know, it would be going forward from the May start date. And again, it's dependent on the 30% reduced earnings.
Okay. Thank you. So next question is, most clubs can't afford anything right now, let alone a lawyer. Are there free services clubs can access? So I guess
I'm laughing because you said, I'm laughing because someone said the word lawyer and free together. I'm not sure that works. There are resources available. If anybody feels like they need to, I can't give you anything off the top of my head. Adam Clevenis, you may have some suggestions too. But definitely if someone needs a point in the right direction or a chat, please give me a call. Happy to do that to set you guys up.
Yeah, and I'll speak to just what we're trying to set up is we're waiting to get through to hear the questions on this call, like I said, and from the coach call in the town hall. And we're going to take a look at what we can do as an organization to provide at least an initial contact point for our members with legal advice or some planning and budgetary advice with Kathy to at least, you know, without flooding things, to find a way that we can at least have an initial contact point so people aren't lost, and we can maybe help find further resources as needed. So we're looking at that right now to try to find out how we can do that as well, and to provide some support and value add for our members, knowing how tight the times are financially. Can you clarify the risk to the club if we rescind a summer job offer? Would it be better to give more notice, i.e. now versus a May 1st start versus waiting? Steve, maybe?
Sorry, can you repeat that, Ian?
No problem. The question is to clarify the risk to the club if we rescind a summer job offer. Would it be better to give more notice now, i.e. like now for a May 1st start, or wait?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I mean, I like providing people notice so they can make informed decisions. As I said previously, most provincial employment legislations allows for termination, usually between the first 30 to 90 days of the agreement, without payment without payment. So again, I think the liability would be very low. Someone did mention fixed term contracts. So again, if you do have a fixed term contract and terminate it, you may be on the hook to pay the balance. But I do think if you have a proper employment agreement, the risk is very low. If you do start up for a week and then there's another government emergency lockdown, I do think there would be the liability would be quite low. Again, based on a lot of the tests I just spoke about, length of employment, ability to find work, length, plus the legislation would likely allow it with little to no payment.
Okay, thank you. Question for Adam. You mentioned the federal wage subsidy is for organizations that are not government funded. Is that provincially funded or federally funded? Reason I ask is our provincial government informed all sports provincial funding is going to stay the same as last year. Does that mean we are eligible or not for the federal wage subsidy?
I would actually ask Kathy to chime in on that. Kathy provided that insight with respect to the funding, the government funding. Kathy, would you have insight on that? And as you answer, I'm going to look online to see if there's any further insight.
So I've looked online, and all it says is publicly funded. It doesn't define whether that's federally or provincially. And so I'm actually going to throw that back to you and say, could you get clarification on this? Because I know that's going to be a big question for PSOs. We're provincially funded. Does that mean we don't qualify for a federal subsidy?
Yeah, I think so. This is a big question in the art sector as well, and I know that my minister Stephen Guilbeault went to bat pretty hard for nonprofits, and most clubs operate as nonprofits, and that's not to suggest they don't try to earn a profit or to try to earn some money, but I'm going to do a little bit of research on that and ask. I've got a staff member online who's on the call right now that can probably provide a little bit of insight to me, and I can come back. My intuition, and I'm loath to provide my unqualified opinion, is that new clubs will be eligible, but let's just I'll just try to provide a little bit more clarity on that before the end of the call.
Okay, great. And again, that was like a little wrinkle that was added in the press conference today. So Kathy and I were texting each other right away and trying to figure out where, and it may be that has not landed in policy written somewhere yet. So we will again continue to follow up. So thanks, and that for that PTSO question. Question: what are the risks of reducing the hours paid to full-time coaches? Stephen?
Yeah, the risk is that an employee would claim, as I said before, constructive dismissal, meaning you've substantially altered their original employment agreement. If they did argue constructive dismissal, then the club would be, if it's found to be constructive dismissal, then the club would be obligated to pay notice of termination as well as the other benefits they normally would receive. Again, I haven't seen that happen yet. I have seen most employees to be very cooperative in a situation like that rather than being terminated or laid off. So I do hope people, again, I know I'm talking about values a lot, but hope they implement their values. But that's the risk to the club. I think the way you present it would be as an option to the employee, and hopefully they choose the one that's most beneficial. As I said before, is this pandemic an opportunity for people to take advantage of a very difficult situation? Yes, it is, and I hope they don't do that.
Okay, great. One other specific question. This is Steve. This is coming back to you. If a canoe club in Ontario is aware that a coach is working more than 40 hours a week, and the club is aware and hours are documented in board minutes monthly, if the coach was laid off, would the club be obligated to pay the overtime hours?
Short answer is yes. Overtime kicks in at 44 hours in Ontario and is to be paid out at 1.5 times anything over 44 hours. So the accrued overtime would be 1.5 times. And one of the conditions of overtime is that it is approved by the employer. It sounds like that may have occurred with the documentation in the minutes. So yes, that would be required to be paid out.
Okay, thanks, Steve. We had just an update, I think, here from Sandra that with the link here, that there was some confirmation found around the 10% original subsidy still being intact. So that's good news that there's 2 options out there. A question, the session, is it being recorded? Are we going to share it? So the town hall session was recorded on last Thursday evening, and it's been posted on our COVID-19 webpage. We're going to do the same with this call and post that. We did not record the coaches call, but we're recording this call and we'll provide it for people to play back. And a number of people in different time zones reached out and said they'd want it to be shared. Another question. So clubs might be afraid. Clubs might be afraid of not taking these grants, that they won't get them next year. Any truth to that fear? Hold on, let me read it again. Clubs might be afraid of not taking these grants, that they won't get them next year. Any truth to that fear?
Yeah, so I think that's in relation to the Canada Summer Grants. So if you are awarded a Canada Summer Grant and you have work for them to do with regards to, I don't know, club maintenance, boat maintenance, something like that, where you can gainfully employ them, then, you know, certainly take that grant. But, you know, you need to remember that you can't piggyback that grant with regards to the wage subsidy, because the grant is technically, you know, if you top up, in most instances, you know, the Canada Summer Grants pays minimum wage. And if you, in your application, agreed that you were going to top them up by X amount of dollars, you're not going to be able to use the emergency wage subsidy for this, because it only applies to those that are currently employed. And this, you know, your Canada Summer Grant position doesn't start until May. So if you know that you've got work for them to do and you're going to be able to demonstrate that they fulfilled the requirements and the terms and conditions of the Canada Summer Grant application that you put in, then, you know, you could look at accepting that and hiring those individuals on through that program.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. Clubs with fundraisers in April, May, or June that represent 25 to 30% of total revenues, would this loss be applicable for the 30% proof of loss revenue for the 75% grant? And I think this is a situation I think many of our organizations are in. So Kathy?
Right, so again, you know, the criteria around the 30% is that they're looking at comparable revenue periods between March and May of 2019 and March and May of 2020. So if your projections for 2020 include revenues that are in relation to that, and you're now not going to make them, you need to look at that comparative to what you made in 2019 and see if the differential is 30% or greater. You can't, right now, you can't go outside of May. So if you're holding an event in June, it doesn't qualify for this 30% revenue loss that the government's looking at right now.
And I'll add a couple things, because I know this is the absolute reality for many of our organizations, that this period of registration and events and fundraising is happening in this critical season. So a couple parts to that. We were certainly happy today when it was clarified that it would be a year-over-year comparison, because that means that reality will be reflected for these months. A couple of things of feedback that we're providing to our partners at the COC and to Adam and our Sport Canada is that, like Kathy mentioned, that if the situation continues as is, we'll have to continue to understand the picture of lost revenue through the summer months, when so many revenues come in for youth programming, day camps, lots of programming that happens, dragon boat programming in some places, corporate training, all these things that happen. That drop off will still have to be accounted for. And the other important thing, just so that we've given feedback on, is that essentially this time of year to make the revenue is what a lot of our organizations live off for the next 12 months. And even if the situation does improve for us by September or October, many of our organizations will still have issues maintaining their operational standards and their employee contracts through to this next season again in 2021, when we can essentially collect our crops, make hay again, and get revenue back where it wants to be. So just wanted to share that that's the feedback we're continuing to give, and that $40,000 business grant or loan, interest-free loan, will certainly help, but that there may be struggles that are still going to come, and just we're continuing to provide that feedback and to our partners. One other question here: the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. It'd be great to hire summer students from May to do virtual training or boat repair in case we do go ahead with summer programs and to support them. Could clubs use this subsidy to hire spring coaches for a 1-month May contract, in brackets new hires? We could then hire them for an additional summer contract if programs do go for the summer.
Ian, I'll hop in here. It's Adam. Just wanted to, before I answer that question, which I think is a good innovative idea, I did find online on the Department of Finance section of the Canada.ca website that eligible employers, Kathy, just wanted to flag this to you. I can send you this link if you like, because look, things are changing so fast right now that it's tough to stay on top of everything, but I do think this is really pertinent information for this call and the stakeholders on it. Eligible employers would include individuals, taxable corporations, partnerships consisting of eligible employers, as well as nonprofit organizations and registered charities. Public bodies would not be eligible for this subsidy. So that's public bodies including municipalities, local governments, Crown Corps, public universities, colleges, schools, and hospitals. Does not apply to a canoe club or a sport organization or a summer camp or anything similar to that. The subsidy would be available to eligible employers that see a drop of at least 30% of their revenue. In applying for the subsidy, employers would be required to attest to the decline in revenue. So I think that's, a matter of finance for most people, but I would like to confirm with Kathy that canoe clubs will be eligible for wage subsidy. And to the question, I think that's a good innovative way to sort of continue to make hay while you're not able to bring people into the canoe club. I think a lot of businesses, and certainly like my staff, are trying to figure out what we can do and what we can all do in order to maintain our productivity. So, boat repair is a really good example of one of those things that needs to be done when the canoe club is typically done in the winter. Virtual and online training is another thing, of course, that's important and can continue throughout this time.
Thanks for that, Adam. That's huge, because in the press conference he actually said publicly funded, which is different than public organizations. So now that, like I said, I think this website went up maybe an hour ago, so I haven't had a chance to actually read through it, but this is huge. So yeah, that definitely impacts NSOs and PSOs with regards to that definition. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And
when I say that things are changing rapidly, since I've been on this call, I've received a call from the chief of staff from the small and medium-sized business ministry. This is obviously today had huge implications, but there are people that are working 20 hours a day to make sure that this goes through. So rest assured that, if you have any issues, questions, or concerns, then use me as a resource and, bounce things off of me. If you feel that your canoe club is in a certain, or your organization is in a particularly different or a difficult position, then just let me know, because we need to be able to flag these things to the people making these decisions.
Great, thanks, Adam. And Derek here just notes that PSOs and TSOs would be eligible as well. Yeah, and that's certainly great news for sure. James, I'll just let you, if there's any other questions coming in before we wrap up. I'll
just let me check my email. I haven't received any in a while, but I'll just bounce back and have a quick look.
Yeah.
No. Everything that I've received, I've posted in the chat.
Okay, great. So what I am going to do is follow up. We'll follow up tomorrow with the recording of this call. We're going to follow up with some specific questions. I'll work with our staff to sharpen up some areas. We may not have a recommendation right away, and obviously the big caveat with our lawyers on the line, there's some recommendations we can't make, but we can definitely provide opportunities for more questions and the contacts to reach out to, and how we can continue to support everyone. It's certainly promising. I hope that this call tonight has provided some information for you. And again, if you have more questions, please do reach out. Si vous avez des questions, donnez à moi ou l'autre personne de CKC. And I will let Casey, if you're there, if you want to jump on with just some closing words before we sign off. Maybe you're not there. Well, that's fine. I know it's late. It's a late night.
I'm here.
Again, oh,
Yeah.
sorry. There you are, Case. Sorry.
Just trying to find my spot. Yeah, I mean, look, we're all going through challenging times. I went through and saw the range of individuals on the call, some coaches, obviously Commodores, committee members, and we're trying to piece together what we can to provide support for you and with you to try and maintain some health while we're struggling through the new normal this summer. It was interesting, you know, to have Adam on the line. It was great, and thank you very much for that. And Kathy, Stephen, Adam, Clevenis as well, to provide you know, some important information and real-time information. Much like everything else we've dealt with in the last few weeks, this is changing as well. But I think it's changing to help us, and I can't help but think there must be one or two models that we can look to try and package up together that would apply to all of us in one way or another. So I'm optimistic. I know it's very challenging. We'll continue to help out. I think Ian has said a lot to capture some closing comments, and I can't thank again, you know, Adam Van Kruveren for his participation and his willingness to really help from the inside. And you know, we have experts in Kathy, Stephen, and Adam Clevenis as well. So thank you very much.
All right. So with that, we'll say good night, bonsoir, and we're here, and let's keep moving forward together. Thank you.